David Hislop, welcome to the Churchfront podcast.
Thank you.
And it's fun to actually be here in your studio. For those of you who are just listening to the audio format of the podcast, we're actually in David's studio in Redding, California, at his home. And I think judging by this room, I would say you're pretty into guitars.
Yeah,
right?
I definitely nerd out over it a little bit.
Yeah, we've got like 4 acoustics. It would take me like 10 minutes to count all the electric guitars and then all the amplifiers over here. So just think of like, if you guys are just listening to the audio format of this, like if you just think of like the ultimate guitar studio, that's where we are at right now. So for folks who don't know you, just introduce yourself. Tell them a little bit more about where you're currently at and where you're serving at and what kind of your life looks like.
So I'm David Hislop. I play guitar for Bethel Music and tour with them currently. I also oversee all of our guitar players at the local church here in Redding, and work from my home studio a lot, recording and making some content for guitar players, and just having fun.
So how long have you been in that role of being at Bethel, overseeing the guitar players there?
Yeah, so we moved here in 2014. So I actually first got involved with Bethel. I had a friend who worked out here, and I went to one of the worship nights. I'd always known about Bethel, but my wife and I were in Virginia at a church, and we were there for like 7 years, and we were just feeling transition. So we were knocking on different doors. So I sent a message to my friend who was in Redding, and just to see if there was any opportunity. And there was an opening on the sound team, and I would also do some engineering and mixing and stuff like that. So right before that, we went to a Bethel worship night that came through. It was the Tides tour, so it was like right after they released Tides. And I worked at the venue that night, and Clint All, who was the production manager, he remembered me from that night after I sent an email to interview, and he liked me because I was helping. I was hired by the local venue to help load in and load out and also attend the worship night. But anyways, it just felt like home as far as the atmosphere, the excellence. So it was a door I wanted to knock on. So we did, and got hired as an audio engineer, and then moved out here and got involved playing on the worship teams, and more and more of my time shifted to guitar-related things. So, like, eventually overseeing the local players and touring and recording. So, that's like a short synopsis of a few years.
What was life? You said back in Virginia. That's where you were based before.
Mm-hmm.
Like, were you serving on on tech teams and worship teams back there?
It was we were both full-time in ministry at this church, and it also had. It was kind of a house of prayer type vibe, so I don't know if you're familiar with IHOP in Kansas City, so it had similar vibes to that, but local church along with it. So I was full-time with that, playing a lot of worship sets during the week, and then also helping to do audio and different things. So kind of if you're a part of a small church, you're kind of like doing a lot of different things. So that was my role there.
Got it.
As well. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah, so what does a life in the week of David Hislop look like? I guess there was, we're in the pandemic season right
pre-COVID
now.
or post-COVID?
Let's talk about pre and then post. Let's talk about both.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
What would it look like for you like 6 months ago?
Yeah, so normally it's pretty heavy with travel, whether it's itinerant trips or tours. We're home and we play locally at church about 2 Sundays a month. So outside of that, I might be gone for 2 other weekends on itinerant trips, or some months where we have tours. Those are generally 12 to 14 days. There's a big value on family here in Redding with Bethel Music, and that's totally awesome because your typical touring band will be on the road for months, and it's hard to do family and sustain like a life when you're in that sort of grind. So I have mad respect for the guys that do that sort of thing. So typically when we do tours, it's only like it's 2 weeks or so. So some months when travel's heavy, it might be you go out 2 weeks and then you're home for 2 weeks playing at local church. There's a lot of stuff outside of playing on weekend services to do here at Bethel too, because there's usually 1 or 2 conferences that happen with the church. So that will be during a week. So a lot of times you're playing for that when you're home. There's also BSSM, so they're serving in the school. So there's kind of a lot to be done in that regard in the Bethel world. And then outside of that, working for my home studio, freelance recording or mixing or doing that sort of stuff. So that was typical pre-COVID week, and it just kind of varied depending on the month. But post-COVID 2020, obviously there's no events, so it's been just a way different year, which has been a bit refreshing to be home, because normally, we were talking about it earlier, I usually fly at least 100,000 miles a year, and I'm gone a lot. So it's a lot of like times in airports and lounges and just traveling. And so to have this year where I haven't even flown once, which is crazy, it's been a bit refreshing and slower pace, and just time to be home and work on different things. So like whether it's YouTube content or creating resources for guitar players, that's what I've been focusing on this year a lot, along with freelancing, again, working from my home studio, recording on projects or what have you. So it's been a different year, but it's been really fun and refreshing. And my wife and I are expecting our first in November, so that's we're excited about that. COVID baby.
Yep.
No.
My wife and I have one coming too. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Right on.
It's gonna get weird with like doing the doctor visits, and like they're even like you can't go like as
to see
husband.
ultrasounds.
Yeah, you can't even go to all of them. So.
Yeah, it's been different, but we're looking forward to it. It'll be fun.
Yeah. So let's talk about the team of guitar players that you guys have, and kind of what the dynamics are like there, leading a team of guitar players.
Yeah.
So how many total do you have right now at the church?
We have, I think it's 12 or 13 total on our team, and that's all contingent upon how many services we're doing in a weekend. So right now we have 3 different campuses locally, so to speak, and they're not. We don't do like simulcast or like streaming linking between campuses, so it's all independent worship teams. So we have College View, our main campus, and then Twin View, and then a small downtown campus. So we have Sunday morning services, some Sunday PM, and then a Friday night service. So between that, I would have to count how many worship teams play. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 maybe off the top of my head. Different worship teams that are scheduled. So, so between all those guys, typically 2 guitars per set, and it's a lot of fun.
Are they going through an audition process with you if someone wants to join the team? Yeah,
so they'll send in a video to Paul McClure, oversees our worship department, so he's kind of the main contact for that, and then he has a team under him, and then different guys oversee the sections, is what we call them, of players. So I oversee the electric guys, David Whitworth oversees drummers, Luke Hendrickson with keys players, Matt Ogden with bass. So we kind of help to give feedback and really just help our guys grow and be a resource for them in any way we can. And just watch audition videos and try to figure out a place for people. If it's open, a lot of that's up to Paul. But
what type of players end up making it on the team?
Well, first and foremost, you need to be local. So that's an obvious requirement. But it's a lot of local players, kids who have gone through BSSM. Typically, if you're in the school, I think the current worship department's policy is you don't serve on a weekend, because a lot of times you're involved with worship teams during the week in school. So typically, a lot of people that join our team have just graduated BSSM, and they want to hang around, so they start serving in local church. But we have a lot of great players, guys, and one girl right now, Kelly. She's great. Is there
like, I guess what are the type of people you have to say no to? Is it a competency issue around, or is it like a tone and style issue?
Yeah.
Is it attitude?
Yeah. Well, here's one thing I'll clarify too, because I've seen on the Gear Talk forums a lot of people talk, and they're like, oh, what are the requirements to play in Bethel? We're not looking for a cookie cutter, like you have to have the Strymon, like Big Sky Timeline and Mobius, you have to have all these specific things in order to play. It's more about obviously your heart, your skill, your tone. It's kind of those three things in a real short, like basic synopsis. So it doesn't have so much to do with, do you sound exactly like me? And I hope they don't. I would encourage everyone to be an individual, but obviously sound good in that, whatever your vibe is. So yeah, there's excellence of heart, excellence of your craft. Put in real simple terms.
Yeah. When you guys are writing and recording for albums, what's your role look like there? Are you helping when it comes to like crafting these final guitar licks that we end up hearing on the albums?
So typically compilations, the live worship compilations are different than a lot of the artist albums. So over the past couple of years, a lot of the artist albums are outsourced to different producers, so not necessarily local. So a lot of it is Nashville guys, and those producers will hire whatever team they're working with or they want for that vibe. So a lot of times the producers make the call for those albums, and a lot of times those albums are geared toward radio a lot. So you'll notice the sonics of them are just a little more like CCM radio vibes. But as far as compilations go, that's still an in-house thing. They've brought in some outside producers to co-produce, but this last one we did, Revivals in the Air, was all our team. So that was a lot of fun. So that started with, Brian and Joel and David Whitworth, Matt Ogden, and JP. They were some of the band guys that helped to kind of co-produce or assistant produce the album. So they worked through the songs that they wanted to choose, or at least a big group of songs. And then after we had those, we spent... this was in January. We had 3-4 weeks in the studio to pre-pro it and write parts. Actually, the way we did this last album was we were tracking every weekend, because not all the artists are local, so they would fly in artists for the weekend. So during the week, we would pre-pro those songs and write all the parts for them, at least to the best of, it was a little bit of crunch time, so it was like as close as we can get everything, because in general, we don't overdub. What you hear on a live record is mostly all live. There are some occasions where we overdub, and this last one we did, or at least I did a good bit. That wasn't because parts weren't there all the way. It's just maybe a lot of it was some of the songs when we got to tracking, we didn't even really pre-pro because of time. So Egypt is one of those where a lot of the parts weren't fully there. So after the fact, as long as we got the arrangement and the capture, I would go back and fine tune my parts or, work with Jonathan. But yeah, for the most part, we're all in the studio together, writing our parts and, trying to do the best we can that way. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
And you guys have a separate studio somewhere here dedicated to just Bethel music?
Yes.
And that type? Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you've been to Bethel Music, the actual building. It's not at the church. Yeah. Okay. So there's a studio in that room, and that's where we did all that tracking. Okay. So it's an actual studio space that's not at the church.
You gotta connect me with whoever the person is to do a tour there.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's a cool spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So an album that just came out, the Revivals in the Air. So that was those different songs, a lot of those recordings just come from various Sundays or from conferences or
Yeah, all of that one. So we tracked this album. I think we started tracking it actually back at Heaven Come last year.
Okay.
In the late summer. So I think certain versions of the songs may have even come from that. They may have we retracked them in January, but they may have meshed some takes together. They liked the spontaneous moment that was captured at this Sunday, but they liked the song. So they may have done some edits to splice those together. But generally it's all live events, and they listen back to versions they like and say that's the version. That's cool. And and go from there.
Wow.
So Champion, I think, was the one that I think the version from Heaven Come made it, and not the live version. I could be wrong. I don't really know.
Yeah. Cool. So let's do. Everybody loves the rig rundown, and we're going to. For those of you who are listening on the podcast, or maybe just watching this on YouTube,
Just
we'll
picture
make another,
just picture it in your mind.
Yeah, just picture
no,
it
I'm
in
just
mind.
kidding.
But we'll make a separate video that's like a more thorough studio tour. But on a typical Sunday, what are you using for guitar?
Yeah.
Pedals.
So
amps.
I'm using my full pedal board, which I'll show you in our studio tour video, and then I have a big rundown of it on my channel as well. So using my board, and then I usually bring 1 or 2 guitars. It depends on the set, whether I need just a standard electric or a baritone. Depends on the song. And then at the church, I'm not sure if you've been over there to look at the amp room or anything, but the church has its own backline amps, so I don't have to haul all of my personal amps over there, because that would be a big pain, especially in this Reading heat. But they're all great. They're the same amps, UK, Korg era 90s, AC30s, ProSonics, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, typically the only thing I bring on a weekend is my pedal board and a guitar or 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And then what about your journey into the world of the Helix and designing kind of, because your usual pedal board is your analog pedals, right? Mm-hmm. But now you're going into the digital world. A lot of folks are, a lot of advantages to it.
Yeah.
But just tell us more about your journey into that. And kind of, yeah, I know you're making patches and stuff like that. So what's that been like?
Yeah, it's been fun. So yeah, ever since I started playing, I've always had pedals. I've never done the multi-effects thing. So here we are, 15 years after I really started playing mid 2000s. And modeling has gotten better, but I've never really taken the time to check it out that much. And I'm a big fan of, only take what you read on forums and online, or even on YouTube videos sometimes with, a grain of salt. There's nothing like just getting the gear and seeing what you can do with it in your hands, or, with your tone. So I was curious to do that, and that started mainly with the Kemper, not so much even the Helix. And part of that was I was curious. Well, it started with a lot of itinerant trips like we do, I was mentioning. Just some of the amps you would get, even if they were in spec on your rider, were so poorly maintained. They would just sound awful, and it would be the most distracting thing. So my thought was, I just want to give the Kempers a go and see what I can do with them. I've never sat down and played with them. I've heard them and never been super crazy about them, but never sat down with one to mess with it myself. So that started the journey. That, and people were just like, hey, you should make some profiles of your amps. I would love to check them out and whatever. Mm-hmm. So that was the kind of starting point for that last year. I was like, to see if it could be a valuable travel option or a backup in case amps were failing on the road, or they just didn't provide the backline we wanted. So that was a fun journey, just getting to know the Kemper, seeing what it could do, capture my amps, and it honestly did impress me. Once you get it into your own hands and dial it in the way you want. Because I could give someone one of my amps I use that sounds awesome when I play it, and when they set it up their way, it could sound totally different. It's just there's so many variables when it comes to tone or mixing or any creative thing. Mm-hmm. So that was a fun, enlightening process, and then from there, it expanded into I wanted to make some impulse responses of my speakers to experiment with loading in, and then after I got done with all of that, I had the same thought for the Helix. I was like, why don't I give all this a try too? So it's kind of just been a fun me exploring and kind of opening all of it up to everyone to check out for themselves. And yeah.
Because you got the whole online store where people can grab those.
Yeah.
You're making. Is it both for the Kemper and Helix?
Yeah, Kemper, Helix, and the impulse responses, which you can load in the Kemper or Helix or the Strymon Iridium. So basically those are just basically digital files of my speakers and mics. It basically captures it and turns it into a file that you can load in the EQ curve, essentially. Wow. If you're breaking that down into really simple terms of your speakers. So, and it really does change the sound and help. So it's cool. It's just real nerdy on the digital platforms. But yeah, all that's available on my store for people to check out. Yeah. So, how old are you? I am 30. I just turned 30.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So
sick.
we were literally growing up at the same time.
90?
2000s, yeah, 90 babies.
Yeah.
Yep. And so mid 2000s, a little nostalgic, but like who are you listening to? Who was an inspiration for you?
Oh, I love
in that
this question.
season of high school, and like what was your first guitar and
Yeah,
like all
okay.
that stuff?
So, back up a little bit. So I grew up Christian family, great, awesome upbringing. Parents are awesome. I was fortunate to have that. My whole family is very involved in worship from like, day one. My older siblings, worship leader, drummer. So I started playing bass actually, and eventually transitioned to electric guitar. But most of my
Same here, man.
nice, and so most of my exposure to music was all church related or Christian. Is very worship, Hillsong, Look to You, More Than Life. Those albums were like my jam back in the day. Salvation Is Here, bass solo.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Anyways, great record. So yeah, I started listening to other music, got into the whole like emo, screamo, hardcore, metal.
Under Oath.
Oh yeah,
Bands like
Under Oath,
that, yeah.
Emery,
Yeah.
Beloved, like bands like that when I was 14 was my jam. So yeah, and eventually got into more of the metalcore thing, August Burns Red, As I Lay Dying, like bands like that. So new metal stuff, but all bands of that era, and there were a lot of bands I liked. So a lot of that inspired my playing outside of the church thing, which is a very different style too. And that's a bigger conversation of the whole thing when musicians identify themselves as church musicians or make a quality or a category of like, oh, I'm a church musician, as opposed to a what musician. I don't know. I see it more as I'm a guitar player. Obviously, I love, as a Christian, I love the Lord. I love to worship. My favorite way to use my gifting is in that context. There's nothing more rewarding than that. But as a guitar player, like I love so many different kinds of music, and yeah, it's so fun. Anyway, so I had a metal phase. I was in a metal band. My first guitar I got, I think when I was 14. So I had a bass. Like I said, I started, and I think it was a Samick Ultramatic. It's just some like Korean guitar that is super cheap, and my parents could afford it for a Christmas present. And then after that, it was all kind of a bunch of just cheap guitars that I would mod because I didn't have a ton of money. When you're in high school, it's like, you don't have money for a $2,000 guitar, unless you do, and that rules. So
I had a very generous grandmother. Who was like, she was like super supportive of
I love it.
ministry and all that. And she was the. But the thing, if I tell my grandmother, if you didn't exist, like I would not, or if you didn't like enable me back then to go into this, like, and buy me my first bass, and, like my acoustic guitar, I wouldn't have gone into worship ministry at all, and like Churchfront wouldn't exist at all. It's all because she wanted to buy me that first guitar.
Come on, that's awesome.
So
it's so cool looking back in people's lives and seeing that one moment or little thing, and it set someone on a course for
So I did not have the money for it either, but
no, I'm no judgment here, man. No judgment. Different guitars. I mean, I had a 1991 Ibanez RG 550 for the metal stuff, and I don't have that anymore. But anyways, so it was fun. But yeah, I found myself mid 2000s. I was deep into all those bands, and anything from like the Killers too, or Kings of Leon. Like I liked all kinds of music of that era. When you're in high school, it's just like you eat it all up.
Yep. Yeah. Me and my friends in high school did the whole garage band thing. Literally played in practice in our garage.
Yeah.
We thought we were like the coolest kids
same.
in northern Vermont. Of course, there's not much happening in northern Vermont.
Nice.
Anyway, so, very, very low bar there. But, dude, well, it's so cool to hear more about your story. And kind of what week in your life looks like, and where can folks go to kind of keep up with what you're up to? Whether that's right now, it sounds like you're doing a lot of like online content. So where's the best place for them to go to keep up with that?
I would say, I think the three places I'm the most active are probably my YouTube channel. My Instagram is just a lot of what I'm up to. Facebook I'm somewhat active on. I'm not it's mainly a family thing, or I do have a page on there, but it's pretty minimal. Yeah. So I would say either my website, YouTube, or my Instagram.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Go to his website. We will link it in the description of the podcast, of this video, if you're watching. Go pick up some patches there. I've heard lots of great things
Thank you.
about them. So
yeah.
Definitely go try them. Actually, one of Chipper, one of my guys, he was messing around with stuff, and because we had a little HX stomp. And
yeah.
It's like, dude, David's stuff's awesome. So
awesome. Thank you.
It's great stuff. Thanks so much for all you're doing to inspire and equip worship ministries, guitarists all around the globe. Keep it up, man.
Thank you.